Forgiveness, in common understanding, is often seen as an act directed toward the one who caused harm. We tend to think that we are the giver and the other person is the receiver. But when we look more deeply, we realize that forgiveness is first and foremost a journey back to ourselves, a way of facing and transforming the pain still lodged within the heart. When we are hurt, betrayed, or treated unfairly, what arises first is not reason, but pain. This pain does not exist only in thought. It is imprinted in the body, a heaviness in the chest, a tightening in the stomach, a sense of fatigue, restlessness, and unease. If this pain is not properly acknowledged and cared for, it gradually transforms into resentment, bitterness, and a heart that closes itself off. Many people are unable to forgive not because they are bad, but because they are hurting too deeply. When the heart is still bleeding, opening up feels impossible. We cannot ask someone who is suffocating to smile, just as we cannot force a deeply wounded heart to become compassionate overnight. For this reason, forgiveness is not a moral command. It cannot arise from pressure or self-blame. Forgiveness can only emerge when we feel safe enough to turn back toward our own pain, when we have enough inner space to breathe with it, listen to it, and understand it. In modern life, people are often too busy to do this. We chase work, goals, achievements, and social roles. We become accustomed to being strong, enduring, and moving forward, but we rarely stop to ask, what is my heart carrying right now? This constant rushing leaves wounds unhealed, merely covered over, temporarily concealed. When our inner energy is depleted by prolonged exhaustion, stress, and anxiety, our ability to regulate emotions diminishes. A careless word or an insensitive gesture can easily reopen old wounds, and in such moments, mistakes happen, not because we are bad, but because we are exhausted. Looking deeply in this way, we begin to see that most human wrongdoings do not arise from malice, but from ignorance and a lack of mindful energy. When there is not enough inner peace, it becomes very difficult to act kindly on the outside. Forgiveness, therefore, is not about erasing wrongdoing, but about understanding its roots. Understanding not in order to justify, but so that we no longer continue to hurt ourselves through resentment. Resentment is like holding a burning coal in our hand, intending to throw it at someone else, but we're the ones burned first. When we cannot yet forgive, it does not mean that we have failed in practice or in love. It simply means that our heart needs more care. Instead of judging ourselves as weak or narrow-minded, we can gently acknowledge, I am hurting and I need time. In Buddhist teaching, there is no hurry. All transformation requires sufficient conditions. A flower cannot be forced to bloom before its time, and neither can forgiveness. When the conditions are not yet ripe, forcing ourselves only creates further injury. The first step of forgiveness, therefore, is not outward but inward. It is learning to sit with ourselves, to recognize our pain without judgment or rejection. Only when we are fully present with our own suffering does the heart begin to soften, and the capacity to forgive arises naturally. When we are hurt, the instinctive response is to look for someone to blame. We need a clear cause to legitimize our pain, and the one who hurt us easily becomes labeled as the bad one, the betrayer, the one no longer worthy of love. This way of seeing helps us stand upright temporarily. It gives us the feeling that we are right, the victim, the one who deserves protection. But if we remain there too long, we imprison ourselves in a one-sided story, a place with no room for understanding or transformation. From the perspective of mindfulness, the one who commits wrongdoing is not only a perpetrator, but also a victim of their circumstances, their unhealed wounds, their lack of awakened energy and consciousness. No one truly wishes to harm others, especially those they once loved. When someone behaves harshly, selfishly, or betrays trust, it is often an expression of inner deadlock. They have lost connection with themselves. They do not know how to hold their pain, so unconsciously they unload it onto others. Like someone walking in darkness, unable to see the path, they collide with everything around them. This does not mean that we must accept all harmful behavior or minimize our own suffering. Buddhism has never taught the indulgence of wrongdoing, but it invites us to look deeper, to see that behind every mistake lies a complex chain of conditions. A child raised in violence is more likely to reproduce violence. Someone who has never been listened to will struggle to listen. Someone who has never been loved properly will be confused about how to love. These insights are not excuses, they are understanding. When understanding arises, anger begins to soften, not because the other person suddenly becomes innocent, but because we no longer need to carry the fire of resentment to protect ourselves. We see clearly that holding on to hatred doesn't awaken the other. It only exhausts our own heart. There's a profound truth that we touch only when we become very still. The one who causes harm is often suffering more than the one who was hurt. They suffer from losing trust in themselves. They suffer from fear of abandonment, condemnation, and judgment. They suffer from not knowing how to repair what they broke and lacking the courage to face it. Stubbornness, coldness, or denial are often just protective shells covering fear. The less someone dares to face their own wrongdoing, the more trapped they become in cycles of suffering. Without a hand that is gentle and patient enough, it is very difficult for them to step out on their own. When we begin to see this, our heart stands at a crossroads. One path is to remain closed, clinging to the role of the victim as a form of defense. The other is to try to open, slowly, so that we do not remain prisoners of old pain. Forgiveness does not require us to return as if nothing happened. First of all, forgiveness means no longer punishing the other person in our minds, and no longer punishing ourselves with rigidity and resentment. When we see the other as more worthy of compassion than blame, something subtle happens. Our pain does not disappear instantly, but it loses its sharpness. It becomes softer, more breathable, more capable of being held. That is when the seed of forgiveness begins to sprout, quietly, without announcement. Just a gentle inner movement from closing to opening, from resistance to listening, from judgment to understanding. There is a very real stage in the journey of love. We know forgiveness is right, but we cannot do it yet. Each attempt to open the heart brings pain rushing back. Each thought of letting go tightens the chest. We scold ourselves for being small-minded, weak, or unkind. But the truth is not that we are flawed, it is that our heart is overloaded. Buddhist practice never teaches coercion. It doesn't demand generosity beyond our capacity. Forgiveness is not a moral order, it is a natural process. If we force an already torn heart to open further, the tear only widens. There is a beautiful image in Buddhism. A handful of salt placed in a cup of water makes it unbearably salty. But if the same salt is poured into a river, the taste almost disappears. The salt has not changed, the container has. Likewise, the wrongdoing may be great, but the issue is not only its size, it is the capacity of our heart at that moment. There are times when our heart can barely hold a small joy. In such moments, even moderate pain feels overwhelming. Demanding forgiveness then is unrealistic and unkind to ourselves. Forgiveness does not arise from gritting our teeth. It arises from the heart growing larger. And the heart does not grow through slogans, but through care. Care begins with honesty. I am hurting. I cannot forgive yet. I need time.
Allowing ourselves to not yet be generous is itself an act of mindfulness, because then we stop pretending to be virtuous while chaos still reigns inside. Some people fear that without forgiveness they will become bad, but what shrinks the heart is not forgiven yet, but resentment left unattended. There's a difference between not yet forgiven and feeding hatred. We can pause without stoking the fire. At this stage, what matters most is not focusing on the other person, but returning to ourselves. We need to restore the life energy drained by shock, betrayal, or deep hurt. When we are exhausted, we cannot hold anyone else. Many people mistakenly believe that forgiveness means forgetting. It does not. Forgiveness means remembering without being stabbed by the memory. And to reach that point, wounds need time to heal. The heart is like a muscle. When injured, it needs rest, nourishment, and time to regain strength. If we force it to carry more weight too soon, it will resist. So when forgiveness is not yet possible, there is only one simple task. Do not make your heart smaller. Do not replay the old story endlessly. Do not torment yourself with if only. Do not force yourself to be better than you are. Instead, do very ordinary things. Sleep enough, eat enough, talk to someone who understands, walk, breathe, slow down. When the body settles, the mind has a chance to calm. One day, without warning, you'll notice that thinking of that person no longer makes you tremble, not because you have forgotten, but because your heart has grown larger than the pain. At that moment, forgiveness happens naturally, without effort. Forgiveness is like a flower blooming. No one can put it open. A common misunderstanding is that once we forgive, we must return to how things were, continue enduring, open the door unconditionally. This misunderstanding makes many people afraid of forgiveness, believing it will weaken them, expose them again, erase boundaries. But true forgiveness and mindful understanding, forgiveness and boundaries are not opposites. True forgiveness is healthy only when it is accompanied by clear boundaries. Forgiveness is the work of the heart. Boundaries are the responsibility of wisdom. We can open the heart without opening the door. We can let go of hatred without letting go of awareness. There are people we forgive but no longer allow close to us, not out of cruelty, but because we have learned the lesson of limits. Forgiveness does not require us to return to places that once wounded us. Buddhism calls this compassion paired with wisdom. Compassion without wisdom becomes entanglement. Wisdom without compassion becomes coldness. True forgiveness requires both. Some relationships involve sincere remorse and sustained change. In such cases, offering another chance may be a path. But in other situations, apologies are made only to be forgiven, not to transform. There, forgiveness does not mean returning. Boundaries are not punishment, they are protection. Protection of our peace, protection of our ability to love without turning to stone. Sometimes, if we are not stable yet, distance itself is an act of compassion for both sides. Because when unresolved resentment remains, closeness easily turns into blame and further harm. In such cases, saying honestly, I need time, I cannot return yet, I am still hurting, is not selfish, it is truthful. Forgiveness is not about pleasing others, it is about not continuing to hurt ourselves. If after forgiving we still live in fear and vigilance, then that forgiveness is incomplete. At that point, we must return to self-care. There is a dangerous form of forgiveness, forgiven to maintain a good person image, to avoid judgment, to not be seen as petty. This kind of forgiveness heals nothing. It only buries pain deeper, where it slowly corrodes the heart. True forgiveness is always accompanied by lightness. If after saying, "I forgive you," the heart still feels heavy and tight, then forgiveness has not reached the heart. In life, some relationships cannot continue, yet they can end with kindness. No drama, no revenge, no need to prove right or wrong, just stopping at the right moment while dignity and gentleness remain intact. That too is a form of forgiveness, granting each other the chance to stop harming one another. When we go deeply into patience, we realize something profound. Patience is no longer about enduring someone, it is a way of being with life itself. At first, patience appears only in conflict. Later, it shows up in daily life, when plans fail, when we are misunderstood, when the body weakens, when age advances, when children choose different paths, when life does not return what we believe we deserve. If we resist each moment, we suffer daily, even without anyone harming us. At its deepest level, patience is agreement with reality, not because we lack it, but because we see it clearly. Only when we stop fighting what is can our energy be used for living, rather than resisting. Buddhism teaches plainly, suffering is not in circumstances, but in the refusal to accept them. Someone who accepts illness suffers less than someone healthy but constantly afraid of sickness. Someone who bows to cause and effect suffers less than one who asks endlessly, "Why me?" Patience allows us to bow without breaking. When the heart is wide enough, life does not need to change much for peace to appear. We no longer demand full understanding from others. We no longer need to prove ourselves right. We stop rushing to fix people. We begin to live with a softness that is deeply stable. At this point, patience is no longer effort. It is like a river that has grown wide. Salt no longer makes it bitter, not because there is less salt, but because there is much more water. We realize some things do not need solving, only passing through. Some people do not need changing, only proper distance. Some wounds do not need digging, only stopping the feeding. Patience saves energy by avoiding unnecessary battles, and that energy allows us to live more deeply, love more fully, and be present for what truly matters. A patient person is not one who submits to fate, but one who does not allow fate to control the mind. They still act, choose, leave, say no, but from clarity, not reaction. In the end, patience leads us to a quiet place. We stop expecting life to be easy and begin making the heart large enough. When the heart is large enough, right and wrong soften, gain and loss lighten, winning and losing lose their grip on peace. Then we live in the world without being deeply wounded by it, not because we are harder, but because we are softer, wiser, and more loving. And that is the silent strength of the awakened heart.